of fits with this theory that somehow this water canopy enabled the earth to be very lush, tropical, like a paradise condition wherever you went throughout the world. It's not too cold. It's not too hot. Don't you like going to Hawaii in the winter and it's 80 degrees and never gets cold there? It must have been like what it was. So that's the theory. That's the theory behind it. Day 3. God creates land and vegetation. God said, let the waters below the heavens be gathered into one place. So now, dry land is going to appear. And let the dry land appear. And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the gathering of the waters he called seas. So now we've got ocean beds, and we've got dry land. And God said, let the earth sprout vegetation. Plants yielding seed, and fruit trees on the earth bearing fruit, after their kind with seed in them. And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed after their kind, and trees bearing fruit with seed in them after their kind. And God saw that it was good. So that was the evening and the morning, the third day. So the dry land appears, the seas appear, and vegetation starts sprouting. You've got bushes and trees and fruit being produced, and now there's food that has been prepared for the animals and for man. Day 4. God creates the sun, moon, and stars. Then God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and seasons and days and years. And let them be for lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth. Isn't that mind-boggling when you consider the immensity of the universe? You know, there's about 100 billion stars in the Milky Way galaxy. And there's about 100 billion galaxies in the universe. We can't even wrap our mind around how big and how immense this universe is that God made. And according to this verse, God made all these things to give light on the earth. It appears that the earth was the center of what God was interested in and concerned about when he made everything. That this planet is the focus of his attention. And the stars and the sun and the moon, they were to give light on the earth. The sun to govern the day, the moon to govern the night. And there we find in verse 16, the very end, 5 little words. He made the stars also. Almost an afterthought. And he made the wait a minute, aren't you going to tell us anything more, Lord? That's it? I mean, scientists are mind-boggled with the stars and the immensity of what God has created, and God just passes right over it. 5 little words, because his interest isn't there. His interest is on what's coming up. In fact, what happens on day 6 is his real interest. And then we find day 5. God creates birds and creatures. Verse 20. Then God said, let the waters teem with swarms of living creatures. Scientists have classified about 230,000 different kinds of creatures that live in the sea. So God's very creative. He's got a great imagination. I mean, I love watching the Animal Planet show on TV. I don't watch much TV, but that's about the only thing I like to watch. And I love to see the creativity of God. You know, octopus. Just that thing looks so bizarre. Or a hammerhead shark. Or the strange creatures. Only God could come up with these things. You know, we copy God and make these science fiction flicks, but we're just copying his immense creativity. 230,000 different kinds of animals that live in the waters and the sea. And in the air, there's over 10,000 kinds of birds. And when I say 230,000, that's not everything. We haven't even counted them all up yet. We're still counting. We're still classifying new ones every year. In fact, scientists have been able to classify up to this time 1.3 million kinds of living organisms. From microscopic, so you can't see them with the naked eye, to something as big as a sperm whale. 1.3 million, and guess what? They add 13,000 more every year. And there's no sign of that number ever letting up. God, this earth is filled with the glory of God and his immense creativity and his genius. So that's what he does on day 5. He creates the living creatures in the sea, and he creates the creatures that live on land. He says in verse 22, be fruitful and multiply and fill the waters and the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth. There was evening, and there was morning, a fifth day. And then day 6. You'll notice in your Bible that there's more space devoted to day 6 than any of the other days. And that's because God is most interested in day 6, because his crowning creation is created on day 6. God starts with animals on verse 24. Then God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures after their kind, cattle and creeping things and beasts of the earth. Creeping things like lizards and maybe insects and snakes. But not just those kind, also cattle. So cows and goats and sheep and things like that. All of these different land animals, wolves, cats, lions, everything we can imagine today. God made the beasts of the earth after their kind, and the cattle after their kind, and everything that creeps on the ground after its kind, and God saw that it was good. Then God said, let us make man. The very last thing that God made was man. It's his crowning creation. And man is made differently than any other kind of creature. Because he says, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over all of the creation that I have just made. So, God creates man as his final act of creation, and man's different. Only man was created in the image of God. And people are always asking, what does it mean for something to be made in the image of God? God's invisible, so it doesn't mean we look like him physically. I believe what that means is that God has endowed man with certain divine attributes, such as language, complex language, creativity, love, holiness, immortality. And this is just a sampling of the various attributes that we possess that the animal kingdom does not possess. These attributes are like God, making us resemble him. We're in his image, in his likeness. And so, as the final act of creation, God sets apart man. One man, later, from that man, he'll make a woman, and he gives them dominion. That's another divine attribute, dominion. He gives man dominion under God to rule over all of the creation that God has made. So there's day 6. This would be why we believe that life is sacred. We believe in the sanctity of human life here at the Bridge. That's why we believe that abortion is wrong. Because we are taking the life of an individual who is made in the image and likeness of God. And we have no right to do that. Only God has the right to give or to take life. Now, abortion is not the unforgivable sin. If you are trusting in Jesus and you've had an abortion, that's forgiven. It's under his blood. But we still must say that abortion is wrong because it's the murder of another human being made in the image and likeness of God. And then day 7, which we're not going to talk about. We were going to talk about day 7 next Sunday. Day 7 talks about God resting from his work. And we're going to see a wonderful picture of Jesus Christ in that day, next Sunday. Now, the person behind the creation, who was it? Well, verse 1 says, in the beginning, God. Anyone know what the Hebrew word is behind God? Elohim. Elohim. In Hebrew, El refers to God. Elah is God in a dual aspect. Elohim is the word for God, but it's plural. Wait a minute. Plural? In fact, sometimes this word is actually translated gods. Over in chapter 3, verse 5, it says, God knows that in the day you eat from it, your eyes will be open and you will be like God, and some translations say gods, G-O-D-S, knowing good and evil. So Elohim, plural. But the verb created in the beginning God created. In the Hebrew, they